Distinguished guests, I now welcome you to the official launch of the Doha Private Bank. Our expert speakers will share their views, and it's my honor to introduce our Group CEO, Dr. Seetharaman.
Thank you, Slim, for the introduction and distinguished panelists. What an interesting world we are in. We are in a changing world. Changes, challenges are enormous. When on March 11th, WHO pronounced this pandemic, little we imagined the consequential impact in terms of great recession. It's confined to economic risk, social risk, human risk, and the environment risk. How do we create sustainability in the midst of changing dynamics, ensuring we set in disaster recovery measures and do the remedial management and make it more measurable, sustainable prosperity? How do we ensure we have set in fiscal measures and monetary measures to map the economic risk? That's what world over the finance ministers and the central bank as technocrats have engaged in alignment of monetary policy and fiscal policy and pronouncements from the government. Huge amount of subsidies, not less than 10 to 15% of the gross domestic product. Every country, over 194 countries in this world have engaged in. Over 22 trillion has been the total commitment so far. The central banker pronounced the money supply interest rates. He has lowered it, improving the debt servicing capacity, ensuring liquidity is at stake. Billions and trillions of dollars have been placed in by the government in fiscal terms, fiscal measures, and there is a perfect alignment globally when G7 has become G8 and G20 today to bring in financial stability to prospects. The purpose is to make sure human prosperity stays in the forefront. Policy measures have been taken, whether it is Federal Reserve, Bank of England, or European Central Bank, Reserve Bank of India, Reserve Bank of Australia, or Bank of Japan. We all have to necessarily recognize we have to keep the interest rate low, improving the debt servicing capacity. We have mapped it to a large extent, and it is working. The financial crisis in 2008 was confined to only one sector, financial sector. Advanced economies were grossly underperforming, and developing economies, emerging markets were performing well. Today, no exceptions. The recent IMF prediction has spelled out in clear terms. We have a contraction of not less than 4.9%. Advanced economies in aggregate terms. 8% is a contraction. Emerging markets, developing economies to the tune of 3%. In substance, the world at large is moving into great recession. That's the kind of challenge we have. So a question remains, how do we bring in financial stability? How do we make sure the financial markets, stocks, currencies, bond, properties, commodities, what sort of reorganization will be there? When do we make sure financial markets are not going to be gambling grounds? What sort of consequential impact it is going to have in terms of economic sustenance? These are some of the challenges we need to understand, recognize, and make sure we map it into business process. Countries or continents individual or institutions have to come together to recognize these challenges and put the business process in place. When it comes to social risk management, social distancing, healthcare, hygiene are all important. That's what precisely every government around the world has promulgated measures which are prudent in substance and substantive compliance. We need to build greater prosperity for global sustenance. So environment risk management as a part of compliance model, which has been widely spelled out over the years, now become more than ever important. Social risk management, ensuring environment is factored into the overall policy measures so that we create more greener postures. We create energy mix which are going to have carbon neutral society, or at least reduction of the carbon emission. So how do we comply with these changing dynamics? How do we create a better world, better citizenship to this world? That's the next task we are all engaged in. We have millions of people, over 16 million people have been impacted. Over 600,000 have been the mortality rate globally, still ongoing. Unless we find medical, clinical solutions, every person in this planet is administered clinical solutions. We are not immune to it. Still, we are facing this challenge, and we have to have productive measures to see the ongoing pandemic is measured and managed for sustainable value chain. So, greater prosperity lies in recognizing these challenges and ensuring we create better world. And that's why sustainable development goal becomes more prolific in eradicating extreme poverty, gender equality, healthcare, education for all, online or offline, offshore or onshore. There is so much positivity our experience we have to gain out of this lessons we are going through. Creating, as I said, environment sustainability, ensuring we have used digital governance bare minimum in the past. Financial inclusion comes in. We also want to make sure we bring in peace, justice through commercial disputes online real time so that orderly truth in action comes in. Production, consumption, supply chains, everything has been challenged. We need to bring in more and more digital access to produce sustenance. These are some of the challenges. So we have to build this partnership. In the midst, we have to recognize, we have to create economic sustenance. We also recognize if the world is going through greater recession, we all have diminution in the value of our investments. Wealth protection is equally important at this point. Wealth creation is one aspect. Wealth protection is equally to be recognized. And we have to necessarily understand which will be the asset class you are engaged in. How do we ensure our risk measurements become more scientific? How do we make sure we protect what we have hard earned? Individual or institutions. That is the very purpose of today's webinar. We have fine experts who are going to answer to you what is going to happen to the currency market. What happened to the dollar? Dollar is overvalued. Now we have seen the reflection in the dollar market. We have already seen dollar is weakening. Rest of the currencies are strengthening. Commodity markets are tearing apart in March and early April. Now some orderliness has come. What will happen to precious metals? Skyrocketing. Is it a safe haven, gold or silver? What will be the reflection in terms of investment? How do we make sure properties, huge diminution in terms of property valuations. What will happen to changing dynamics? Now we can clearly see our business model is changing. Do we need conventional physical space? Can we rationalize the whole mechanism? Do we need all these physical locations? We are no more location centric, we are information centric. So what is the changing dynamics? We need to understand this. We have to understand equity market is going through extraordinary set of realignment, global, regional, local. The price to book value is overvalued in some certain parts of the world. It is truly reflecting the sense of gambling grounds. So how do we measure this? Which market, where to invest? How to measure this changing dynamics? In the midst, we have invited the best of the panelists, whom we have association of our partner bank, Bank of Singapore, and again, Goldman Sachs, and the real estate from Cushman, are all going to be intelligent inputs for us to share. Over 28 countries have enlisted in this webinar. I'm going to show you a glimpses of Qatar for a few minutes. For those who are wanting to know what Qatar is all about, in the next 3 to 4 minutes, I'll show you some video clips for you to enlighten, because Qatar itself is an investment opportunity. Qatar's political progression, social progression, and the economic progression has been the telling story. Here is some of the mind-boggling facts and figures of Qatar. Qatar as an economy has moved from 1998 from 25 billion to $200 billion economy. And the country's GDP and the reserves, if you measure it, twice of the GDP is the external reserves and internal cash accruals and gold. In terms of import bills, we can pay for 2 years without additional revenues. Commodity driven, essentially plenty of opportunities in terms of hydrocarbon growth in the coming days, as well as non-hydrocarbon. We host 2022. Our infrastructure is second to none. Airport, seaport, road, rail, networks are all showing its world-class infrastructure state. So that is a place where we come from. And here are some of the glimpses.
Located on the region's busiest shipping route, Qatar is perfectly positioned for international trade, with direct air and sea connections to Asia, Africa, and Europe. Qatar is becoming a leading destination for next-generation business models. Its thriving, knowledge-based economy has helped secure its place among the most competitive business environments in the world, an ideal destination for foreign investment. The past 4 decades have seen a 9-fold increase in Qatar's population to 2.7 million. The current political blockade by neighboring countries has only served to strengthen the nation's self-sufficiency, and strategic investment continues to accelerate. Qatar has already spent $33 billion on infrastructure projects, with new contracts to be awarded over the next 3 years, not least with the 2022 FIFA World Cup on the horizon. The national strategy, Vision 2030, is even more ambitious. Qatar is known as the world's leading supplier of liquefied natural gas and a leading player in aviation and sports and the media.
Qatar economy is going to contract not less than 4.8% this year. Possibly it will move up to 5.75% growth next year. It has to go through current account, a small deficit and fiscal deficit as well. But we have prospects in place. We have promises to deliver.
But as I mentioned, regarding the North Field, we are full steam ahead. We are, as we have mentioned in the past, we're going to be awarding all our contracts for North Field expansion project. We have 2 phases, the east and the south expansion. We're going to go from 77 million tons per annum to 110 million tons per annum by 2025, and then up from 110 to 126 by the year 2027. and we've ordered all the shipping requirements, and we've booked slots for about $20 billion we've announced just a couple of weeks ago, and that's at a cost of around $20 billion US, and we've booked up 60% of the entire world's capacity of building LNG ships. So these, we call them our moving pipelines, if you will, but that's to have our full supply chain up and ready by the time we have all the developments in place.
That's huge. From 77 as on date, 2025, moving to 110, and then 127 in 2027 is something which is equivalent to over 6 million barrels of oil if I put in one fabric. That's not alone. We have non-hydrocarbon growth as well. Qatar is also having sovereign wealth funds interested in investments in multiple sectors in multiple countries. That's what we have done. And that's giving enormous amount of balancing force when we have oil price fluctuations or LNG, which is linked to oil index. We recently issued 10 billion bonds. Why did that? Our debt papers are well in terms of properties. So non-Qataris can own properties here. We have pronounced public-private partnership model. We have world-class infrastructure in terms of FIFA. Stadiums are shaping up and close to conclusion. We have airport, which is world 5-star airlines hosting Qatar Airways. Essentially, our infrastructure is second to none. And our stock market has been performing reasonably well. In the current context, we are down by 10%. And we have a silver bullet solution, those who are interested in investing in terms of Qatar exchange traded funds. Doha Bank has been handling substantive returns we gave over the last 2 years. Price to earning, price to book value, if you look at it in relative terms, looking at the economic fundamentals, you can interpret this is a market to invest and there is growing needs. And this is exchange traded funds.